Hello everybody. I didn't have the same technical difficulties as David had. However, my iPad has gone missing and I've needed it 3 times this week. Neither one of my girls say they've got it. And then I turn up here today with my little laptop and there's a password on it. I don't know the password. I don't have a fingerprint. No, it's sending text messages. I'm in the shower. What do you want? I need a password very fast. So I've been saved by the bell. I have a password. So I've got a small presentation. I won't bog everybody down with information, but Parramatta's an exciting time right now. And I know from everything David's told me that drivers are mostly and predominantly affected when they are in the city and they're working around the city. I cannot solve your problems today, all right? But we are working with businesses and community to try and address some of those issues. And I'm happy to take a lead from a councillor perspective and really push what businesses need, which the organisation may not always necessarily be listening to. But just be mindful, a lot of those decisions come down to numbers. And when people have got to make decisions about who do they vote for and what do they do and what are they going to do for me, the situation that you guys are in from a work perspective are one of those considerations you can take. Put your councillors on notice. What are you going to do for us in relation to parking? Because I think at the moment, and probably for the next 5 years, it's going to be Parramatta's biggest issue. So we'll just move forward. This is what Parramatta is going to look like. It takes place as a metropolitan Sydney Central CBD. Parramatta is growing. What you're seeing here is a projection of the planning proposals that we have for the CBD. We've also got, in addition to the development, we've got projects such as a new stadium, a light rail, a museum of applied arts and science. This map represents the development pipeline in the CBD. We are experiencing unprecedented growth. The CBD planning proposals allow for growth of up to 47,000 additional residents and 49,000 new jobs to be created in the CBD by 2056. When I see a picture like this though, I get excited at the growth of where Parramatta's going to go. I know at the moment, I think we've got pending, and if I counted it, it's probably not far off it, but we've got something like 76 pending planning proposals for the city. The growth is rapid, and I don't believe there's any other city in Australia that has seen the growth as fast as Parramatta will. Next slide. So we've got some statistics here. Council has undertaken a strategic transport study for the CBD to support those planning proposals that you've seen. The graph at the top illustrates the growth in the number of trips on all forms of transport in the CBD. You can see that modelling estimates 2 times to 3 times as many trips to the CBD by 2036 and 4 times by 2056. Without fundamental changes to the city and how we travel, we will choke in traffic. The graph at the bottom, so this one down here, indicates the mode share targets to move from the majority of the CBD workers who are now arriving by private car. And the city's vision is to reduce that down to 20% by 2056. Can you go to the next one? Thank you. We will never accommodate the growth unless we put pedestrians and public transport first. Parramatta Light Rail is accelerating the transformation of our CBD. The image here on the left represents the possible outcome for Church Street. Parramatta has narrow streets and heritage buildings close to the road. Parramatta Light Rail will close large parts of Church Street and Macquarie Street through the traffic. Although light rail will increase access to the CBD will be impacted. Traffic and street parking will also be impacted. Movements of trucks and loading will also be impacted. The City is working with Transport for New South Wales through the Sydney Coordination Office to advocate for the needs of residents, businesses and visitors. So I guess this is the part where you guys are probably predominantly interested in, because it's what you do on a daily basis. Off-street parking. And sorry about the mess up. It looks pretty on my screen, but there's an overlay when it makes it big. Deliveries play an important role in serving the city. Deliveries within the city centres and town centres and on main roads require more attention than suburban streets. It is preferred that deliveries occur off-street within developments. Off-street loading docks are generally available for large residential, commercial and mixed-use developments. When planning deliveries, transport providers should be considering the following: the size of the trucks that can be accommodated at the sites, booking requirements to use on-site loading facilities, access arrangements for secure loading areas. Council is currently reviewing planning controls. The number of loading bays within a development will also be considered as part of the review. On-street delivery. Demands for on-street parking is generally high within the city centres, town centres, hospitals and education institutes. Some streets also do not provide on-street parking. For streets that do not facilitate deliveries, transport providers should consider delivering outside parking restriction hours and/or obtain a temporary road occupancy permit from Council's Traffic and Transport Services, noting that parking is to be in accordance with the road rules, and unless there is an approved temporary road occupancy permit obtained from Council. Now, separate to the slide in relation to on-site on-street deliveries, I know one of the biggest complaints around the city, and particularly moving forward with the light rail, is what is that going to look like, and what is that going to look like for our businesses. We are trying to take a coordinated approach, potentially where there'll be certain times of the day we're asking businesses to work with council and their suppliers to have a coordinated approach in relation to what's the best time to accept these deliveries and what's the location. And council is looking, as far as I'm aware, and I'd accept nothing less, to support businesses in accommodating circumstances. I've heard from a lot of businesses on Church Street that they're really worried because their suppliers won't give them a certain time sometimes. They're just told, oh, we're going to arrive at, between 10 and 12. We're willing to work with those businesses so those suppliers can make appropriate arrangements. There's going to be no fast end solution to solve every business's problem in Parramatta. For you guys, you're going to be trying to drive through light rail roadworks, development roadworks, not to mention the growing amount of people and roads that we're going to lose passage of. My understanding is Church Street will become carless. The city's moving towards peripheral transport nodes. There is a vision of council to move vehicles away from the city, and they're doing that with the backing of putting in light rail and adequate public transport. But one of the things that I've pushed for so far within council, if you look at our parking strategy across the city, we've got a certain amount of on-street parking, and at the moment, until they start closing, we do have parking stations. But what people probably aren't aware of, our parking stations are actually only operating at something like 70% capacity. Most people are parking on the street. Now, how do we get people into our parking stations? Because if we get people into the parking station, then that provides us with more on-street parking, which would then benefit businesses in relation to deliveries and being able to potentially increase loading zones. One of those strategies that I would suggest, and it hasn't been at all endorsed by the organisation, would be if you increase the cost of parking for on-street parking, people might then start looking at viable options in relation to going into parking stations. And I'd like to use Manly as an example. And, you know, probably another fun fact that people may not be aware of, Manly's actually running at 150% capacity in relation to parking. So that means that Manly can charge whatever they want to park and people are willing to pay it. People are willing to pay it because there's no other option. Once you get to a position where, and I don't at all believe that we should increase parking costs to an exorbitant amount, but once you get to a position that we're operating at 100% capacity, I think then that opens options to look at what other avenues that we can do. So we are taking into consideration, you know, the needs of businesses and community, but we're really trying to juggle the growth of a city at the moment. And the last slide, I think it is the last slide that I've got, again, something that you guys can probably all relate to, is issues in relation to illegal parking. Parking on footpaths, parking on driveways, double parking, parking on travel lanes, parking in no stopping and overstaying time parking meters. But I want to assure everybody that one of the strategies that we are looking at is trying to be a little bit flexible in relation to issuing infringements to businesses. And there's already some strategies in place, and we're looking to increase those strategies. But for example, Parramatta Council, I think we can sign the Office of State Revenue to facilitate the parking fines, but they deal with Parramatta alone in the area that they deal with. They don't have any other council that they're processing. We're one of the only councils where we've been able to have an agreement with them. If you were, for example, to go over by 10 minutes on your parking ticket and you're in a position to provide evidence that you really were caught going upstairs with a load of furniture, you had your money in your meter and you were on your way back and you could prove that, then, you know, you're in a position to ask for an exemption. And we're there not to necessarily just make it difficult and, you know, fine people. A lot of the fines are necessary, and they're necessary because of public safety, and also because there's other people that need to be able to come and go. On-street and off-street parking is short-term solution. If you want to come for the day and park, then you go to Westfields or you go to a parking station. Other than that, I've probably got not much else to say, except that thank you, David, very much for having me here today. I've always been a big supporter, and I'm happy to answer anybody's questions later in the evening if they've got any. So thank you very much, everybody.